I just kind of always been like, yeah, Joel, he's the guy that makes people that are known across the country, known across the world. Like that's like how I describe it, but I don't really know how you describe it.
Well, I mean, I use the title of global consultant because I'm basically advising studio owners all around the world. But really, I'm a former owner turned advisor, right?
Okay.
I inspire creatives how to crush it in business.
Cool. Welcome to FrameOne. I'm Dryson. Today I'm hanging out with Joel Pilger of RevThink. Joel, first and foremost, thank you so much for being on FrameOne today.
Sure, good to be here.
Yeah, just to kind of give a quick brief synopsis, FrameOne, the goal is to kind of explore your emotional journey from studio ownership to exiting the studio to starting a consulting group. I didn't bring notes. I didn't really prep or prepare. So wherever this conversation goes, it goes. It's just kind of a casual hangout.
Emotional journey. So get ready for some tears.
I hope so. If you make me cry, I'm going to...
I get a prize, right? I get a gold star if I
get a prize.
If I make you cry, I'll cry easy. I'm one of those. I'm a big softie.
So let's go back to the very beginning. You have an idea. I'm going to be a studio owner someday.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm thinking back to, so I graduated from Georgia Tech in industrial design, but I'd always been entrepreneurial as a kid. And I mean from like age 6 or 7, me and a best buddy, Mike, across the street, we had 30, 40 crazy little entrepreneurial ventures that we did over the years. I was just one of those kinds of kids. So for me, by the time I graduated from college, I was already like, well, when am I going to do the grown-up version of some sort of a business? That was just the way I was wired. My parents were also super, super supportive. So I started working in industrial design as a freelancer in Atlanta, started getting into computer graphics as a way to visualize designs.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, this computer graphics thing, this is cool. And by the way, we can animate this stuff. That's cool. Started working in that. And then shortly thereafter, I said, what if I actually launched a studio? Maybe I could like do this as a business. And fortunately, I had my very first job right out of the gate was I got a lead on the Charlotte Hornets, the NBA team. They were producing a new show opener for their broadcast television games and all that. And I went in and pitched them and said, you guys should do an opener like this. And they said, oh my God, we love this. And they bought it. And so right out of the gate, my first project was this, by today's standards, probably a $50,000 job for this nationally recognized franchise. And so right out of the gate, my company does this project and everyone is like, whoa,
where did this come from?
Who's this and so forth. So that's where I started the company and that's how it started. Yeah.
So talk to me about that first initial team. Was it just you?
Yeah, team. There was the animator, that was me. There was the designer, that was me. There was a producer. Oh yeah, that was me. Yeah, it was very much me solo for a couple years. When I decided, like in that first year, I said, I decided to move to Colorado.
Okay.
Because that had long been a dream. And moved out here, had 2 partners at that time. That didn't work out, so they bailed. So for a short period of time, there were some business partners, but then I was back to being solo here in Colorado, which is where we are right now, here at Camp MoGraph. So it's always good to be back in my adopted home state. But I didn't grow the team for several years. I had a, junior animator with me for a little while, and then a full-fledged mid-level 3D animator with me for a while. It wasn't until, to be honest, it was 7 years before I started to really grow the company, and I would say, and before I was really successful or thriving. It was an extremely painful and difficult journey those first 7 years. From the outside looking in, people would be like, oh, Joel, you're so awesome and you're doing all that cool work and that's so great. But I was kind of running myself into the ground. I was unfulfilled and I just wanted to reach for this next level that I sensed was out there and possible. But that didn't really kick in until year 7.
Okay. So I want to go ahead and go back to that first project real quick.
Okay.
Being that entrepreneurial person and being, say, brave enough to walk in and pitch an idea, considering that project would have been a $50,000 project in today's money, was it a $50,000 project in $94 dollars and cents?
No, I think it was like 30,000 or so in those dollars. So somebody smart do the math, right? After inflation, it's probably today I say figure about 50. But it was a really cool experience because when I think I met these people and I said, hey, I have this idea. I would love to pitch this to you. Of course, I didn't actually have an idea.
Right.
But I knew I could come up with one.
Okay.
So unbeknownst to them, they're like, yeah, we'd love to see your idea. Come in 2 weeks from Wednesday and share what you've got. So I sit down and I just start drawing and scribbling and taking some of my industrial design chops, my abilities to draw and sketch, and drew a storyboard on pencil and paper and went in and just said, check this out. And they all were like, whoa, you can do this? I'm like, heck yeah. And I showed them some of my work so they could see, oh, okay, I guess you do that animation thing. Now this is 94. So we're talking about a period in time
like
where—
Toy Story just came out.
Yeah. Like this is just after Jurassic Park. This is around Toy Story. So if you could do anything in 3D that showed lighting and, I don't know, any kind of visual effects, people were like, whoa. So in a way, the combination of that engendered confidence. The storyboard made them say, wow, this is amazing. And they said, go. And I guess I got the first half and got started. Hired a friend of mine that I knew I was going to need. Went across town and rented the high-end computer and software that I needed to in order to do the work.
Yep.
And made it happen. It was like a 2-month process. It took a month just to render it.
What I'm interested in is the fact that your first project, being that entrepreneurial person, came in at $30,000 in '94. Mm-hmm. A lot of people in today that are just starting studios and starting up will be like, I just need a $5,000 project, a $10,000 project.
Sure.
So I'm curious, what gave you the bravery to kind of come out swinging for the fences like that?
That's such a good question. So first of all, I love that you just used the phrase swing for the fences, because we'll come back to that.
Okay.
All right. I mean, part of it was I had been involved in business and as a freelancer, and I'd done a lot of crazy kind of entrepreneurial whatever things. So I kind of knew when I'm thrown into something, I can kind of make it up. I can figure it out.
Okay.
I can be scrappy and be resourceful and make something happen. How did I dare to go in with like that kind of a number? I think at the time, this is going to sound so like pedestrian. I think I said, what's my time worth? Because you say, well, okay, I've been making this much as an employee and this much essentially per hour. What if I don't know, doubled that roughly, because now I'm a freelancer.
Yep.
And it's going to take me, if I'm going to do this project, it's probably going to take me about this much time. Then I'm going to have to hire my buddy who's going to do that, and he's going to spend 30 or 40 hours of this. And I just kind of said, dang, I think this thing is like almost $30,000 to do this.
Day for you is like, whoa, that's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. Yeah, I think at the time, if I'm honest, I think my salary was just a little bit more than that.
Okay.
I think my salary was like in the high 30s.
I can make a whole year in a month.
I can make a whole year in a month. But I don't know. I don't know if I had other like comparative data at the time, like, oh, this is what the going rate is, or any of that. I think, and this is a lesson I've practiced my entire career. I now teach this to my clients and fans of, you know what, go in, swing for the fences, right? Like people who are starting out and they think, oh, I got to start small and so forth. I'm like, yes. However, you really owe it to yourself to make a little bit of time and space and swing for the fences. And that was how, like, I just kind of propelled my company right out of the starting gates with that win. So, the answer is, a combination of confidence, I don't know, a little bit of bravado, maybe a little bit of ego, maybe a little bit of naivete, because by the time the project was done and I added up all the numbers, I did okay, but wow, it was way more work than I expected it was going to be.
It tends to go that way.
It tends to go that way, especially when you're inventing something for the first time. You look back later and you say, oh, I thought I was going to spend 80 hours on this. I spent 180.
Right.
You're like, okay, I didn't exactly make super bank on that, but.
So you start this fun project. You keep just grinding and chugging away for 7 years. At what point were you like, this is a lot of work. I need to hire somebody as a full-time employee?
Well, I remember one moment where I was working on a project for Ford through their agency, JWT, and it's just me, and I'm in my studio, and I've got, I don't think 3 Silicon Graphics workstations, and I'm building something in Softimage, which was the 3D software of that era, and it's 9:00 at night, I remember my then wife was like, "Where are you? Why aren't you home yet?" I'm like, "I got to get this thing rendering because it's going to render all night." This was the way we did things. Okay, be home soon. Yeah. And then it's 11:00 and I'm still not ready to hit the render button. It's 12:00. Okay, I think I'm about ready to hit the render button. And I hit the render button and I get the dreaded Softimage internal error, which is the equivalent of like the blue screen of death. Like, oh no, it's not going to render. I spend the next 3 or 4 hours, I don't even remember, getting into the place where it can finally render. And I'm thinking, this is my life, man. It's 3 or 4 in the morning. I should be home. I should be with my family. I should just like, this can't be my life. And it was like, sure, I have, quote, freedom, but I feel like sometimes I've built almost like a
slavery where you're a slave to the business.
Yeah, like I've built brick by brick this thing around me, and now I look around and I'm like, is this a jail cell or is this a, right?
Yep.
The door's always open. I can leave any time, but still I feel kind of trapped.
Yep.
And so at that time I just had this sense, because I can remember literally being in tears, right? I told you you're going to make me cry. Now I remember being so exasperated in that moment when I was like seeing that Softimage internal error, and I was just like, damn it. I'm like, this can't be my life. And that was when I just basically made a decision the next day of, I've got to do something different. And short period of time after that, I brought on my first employee. I also started going through entrepreneurial coaching. I moved the studio into downtown Denver, brought on a business partner. I mean, I can tell you all these other things, but I started making some major shifts.
It was an intentional pivot point. It wasn't just, okay, I'm busy, let's hire somebody.
Correct.
I like that.
Correct.
So because you had that moment of F this, for lack of a better term, what was the immediate results for the business growth? As far as, now we have an additional resource here, we have somebody here, I can have more time pitching, talking to people, building relationships, or was it just, no, I've got someone who can hit render at midnight?
Well, let's see. I would say the results really started to show up. Let's fast forward maybe about a year.
Okay.
Because moving the businesses into downtown Denver, I had approached, this was a huge move, by the way, right? I mean, I'm moving 80 miles up from Colorado Springs into downtown Denver, leasing a space in downtown Denver.
Which is not cheap.
Right. I have now a business partner. I have a full-time 3D animator. We even hired an assistant, like call it producer at the time. This was all
That's a lot of growth in a year.
This was a lot of gambling, right? There's a lot of gambling, right? We also bought a digital Betacam deck at the time that was, I don't know, $30,000 or $40,000. All this, right? But the reason I did that was because I approached this agency, JWT, in downtown Denver and said, hey, we've worked together. I think I want to move my studio right down the street from you guys. Would that be a good idea? And they were like, hell yes. Meaning we would love to work with you more if you were right here. That became like just a core base account. So when we moved into town, I knew I had enough resources to say to someone like JWT, come into our studio. It's furnished. We have a flame suite. We have an edit suite. We have, I mean, it was all Band-Aids and duct tape behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But I was making this gamble called, if we can just land this piece of business from this agency, I think that'll provide enough money for us to reach this next level. And that provided the foundation for me to start swinging for the fences at the next level. But it was very much because having that team gave me the ability to, it's what I call focus on my genius. So rather than being the guy in the chair that was doing the 3D all the time now, and the guy that was doing all the editing and the whatever, I was able to go out and start meeting people, building relationships. We won a lot of business from Dish Network, which was there in town in Denver, and so on and so on. But this idea of, it's really a classic division of labor concept that, we know from, is it Adam Smith? Who's the guy that invented, father of economics, concept. But my being able to focus and not wear 32 hats. I remember one time listing all of the different things it took for me to run my business, and being able to say, let's just get that down to 12, and then maybe 6 things, and then maybe someday 3 or 4 things. And that's very much the trajectory over the next 20 years that unfolded.
I love that. I want to step back to that year transition period, because to go from, working until midnight, just suck, to having all this stuff and moving to the studio downtown Denver within a year, the financial stress of a gamble like that could not have been just it'll be fine.
No, it wasn't. But I will also say this, I can get really practical and really honest with folks here, is that was not I didn't take on serious debt, because I always knew, okay, if we can go out and win this job, then I'm going to hire that person immediately. So I'm going to have that person kind of in the wings, waiting in the wings, or, we've got to buy this expensive tape deck that's $40,000 or something. Well, I'm not going to buy that and hope the job lands. I'll have it all ready to go. And then when we land that $20,000 spot that I know is going to turn into 3 or 4 more of those, and then the revisions, and then the tags, and we land that job, boom. So we were always very shrewd and frugal. We always dealt with things on a cash basis. If we ever put anything on a credit card, we knew that check is coming in on that date and we're paying that sucker off. We didn't even get a line of credit, I think, for probably another 5 or 10 years. So we were always operating from a cash basis. So yes, scary, and those are big commitments, but I don't know. I think something I've learned, especially in the years that followed, and I now teach this to a lot of my clients as business owners, is we get really spun up about making these commitments, like hiring somebody, signing a lease, buying that piece of equipment, whatever. Some of those things are not easily unwound. Okay, when you sign a lease, okay, I get it. I'm going to be very cautious with you and say, Dryson, let's really pause here before we sign this. But when you buy a piece of gear, when you hire a person, there is kind of an undo button. What I was taught by my coach, who was this guy, Dan Sullivan, was he said, Joel, you can try anything for 90 days. And I would approach decisions like, okay, can I try this? Can I make this gamble and see what it looks like in 90 days? And if it's not working, pull the plug. What that did over time was it gave me a bias towards action and towards what's possible, what might happen. Because we, as human beings, we immediately go to, well, this could suck. Like, this could really suck, and this could be really expensive, and there could be a lot of regret. Okay, got that. But what if you're right? What if it actually does play out? What if it leads to something you don't even see yet? And that bias towards, I don't know, an optimism and what's possible, and hey, I can try this for 90 days, has obviously served me very well.
Okay. I'm reflecting back onto the interview that I had with Aaron Swarovski, and we were talking about how the first couple of years felt like one thing, and then kind of went to a different phase, and then a different phase. And I'm kind of noticing a similar trend where those first 7 years were, baby impossible pictures.
I call them my ashes years to reference the old Cinderella classic.
And then it sounds like the true startup years is like, when we started bringing people on and having that entrepreneurial switch. What was the next big phase of impossible pictures?
Well, kudos to Erin. I think she's amazing. And I've enjoyed getting to know her, and I know some of that story, which is very, very cool. Yeah. The next phase was that post 7 years. So years 8 and beyond. That season was, I would say, where we grew from, call it 2 or 3 people to around a dozen. And what that season was marked by was there's a new kid in town, in a sense that, hey, Joel and my partner Steve, those are those 2 guys that are in town, and they're doing really cool work. And we were also doing work for clients far outside of Denver.
Yeah.
We were starting to do TV network rebrands and doing promo work for entertainment companies and things like that. And so I think when I look back, I think of there's this photo I'm remembering where, of course, we would occasionally do some sort of a mailer or a promotional thing, or we're going to host a happy hour, or those kinds of things. And I remember taking this picture of our team, and I think there were 12 of us at the time. And we just all kind of lined up and some photographer took a picture of us, and then we put it into some sort of a mailer or an email or something that went out and was like, hey, looking forward to seeing you at the happy hour. And I remember one of my clients who came to the happy hour was like, man, you guys are, you guys are kind of crushing it and so forth. And he referenced this photo of all of us standing there. And he just kind of made a remark about, hey, you guys kind of have this like swagger, like kind of badass looking. Like, a lot of you had your arms crossed and, were looking at the camera. And I just kind of laughed because, we're just all sweethearts and friendly people. But it was that moment when I realized, oh, yeah, I guess we're kind of doing it. And we're gaining the respect of our industry, of our clients, of the community there in Denver. And yeah, I think it was very much marked by, this was the first time that the company was producing the kind of work that I knew we were always capable of.
That's awesome.
And it's funny because that actually makes me a little bit emotional to say that, because man, when you're on that journey and you're in that 7 years, you're like, shit, I know I'm capable of something greater. I feel called to make it. It's this thing that just, it drives me. And at times it drives me crazy. At times it drives the people that I love crazy, because I have this sort of obsession.
Absolutely.
Right. And it's not just producing the great work, but it's also generating great money, and it's generating the like attention and respect that you I don't want to say you deserve.
It could almost be an addiction.
Yeah.
Chasing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you start to finally scratch that itch and enjoy some of that satisfaction, that's a cool season of your business.
I'm excited to get there someday.
Yes, I am as well.
So I want to kind of look at the whole of Impossible Pictures from starting up with just you to bringing everybody on board. What was the peak as far as people or top revenue bringing in of your season there?
Sure. So we peaked around $5 million a year. We had a full-time team of 25 people. What's remarkable, though, I remember at that time, we were working with a lot of freelancers and crew, because we were doing live action projects and things like that. And I remember one year going to my bookkeeper and said, hey, how many people are we working with freelance? And he came back and he said, oh, do you mean like post freelancers? I said, well, no, all freelancers, like including crew. He came back and he said, 203. And that's when I was like, okay, whoa, something's happening here, because this size team and that size network of freelancers, like, wow, that's a lot of activity. So that's kind of what it looked like. And I would just say the composition of our team, there was myself and my partner. I was very focused on business development and marketing and running the company.
Yeah.
My partner was really a director / creative director. And then I had several creative directors on staff, several senior designer animator types, senior editor, colorist. I had probably 3 producers, maybe 4 producers, including an executive producer, senior producer, mid-level producer, coordinating producer, because I love producers, if you can't tell. They're the unsung heroes of our industry. I'm just going to say that. And then there were a few other operations people. So, office manager, had an operations VP, and finance controller. I might be forgetting somebody else, but that was the look of the team. And there were I should say there were probably another 8 or 10 people in there. I would just say are motion designers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sort of the bulk of the creative team, if you will.
So I've talked to a few owners over the years, and there's a trend that I've noticed where sometimes people have an idea of, I want to be this $5 million, $10 million, $15 million studio. They get out there, they achieve it, and they're like, this is not what I thought.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel that?
Yes. It took me a while, because I will say this. First of all, I can remember when it was just me, and I thought about, man, if we land this project with Disney, which we did, that was very exciting. I thought, oh, who knows what could happen? Maybe a year from now, we might be like 6 or 7 people. And in my mind, I imagined a room with 6 or 7 animators in it.
Yeah.
Which was super naive. Like, as I grew, it wasn't 6 or 7 animators that I hired. That you can't run that company. So it's funny how we have these pictures in our mind that are, I don't know what they're based on. They're not based on any reality. As my sort of company grew, it just looked very different than what I ever pictured. When I got to the point where we were 25 people, if I'm very honest, even though it was exciting because we were growing, it was exciting because we had a lot of, I would say we had a lot of expertise and a lot of capacity. Like we could tackle really cool problems.
Yeah.
Like we could do a $1 million job. That's an exciting thing when you can say, like, look somebody in the eyes and say, yeah, we can do that. And you know you're making a promise that you're going to deliver on at that scale. That's very exciting, right?
Scary, imagine a little bit.
Yeah. And I'm looking at my buddy Mitch here in the distance. Like, there's also the moment when you're like, oh, shoot, careful what you wish for. Because after you shake that person's hand, there's probably a moment about 3 or 4 weeks into the future where you're going to be on set and everything is on you. And you suddenly realize, wait a minute, we're burning $300,000 in one day. And if this person doesn't show up, or if that light falls in that person's head, if we don't have the proper insurance coverages, did we get the paperwork signed with whatever, the union, non-union? I mean,
You're making me nervous to sit here.
Yeah. It's exciting, but you're also like, whoa, I just thought it would be really cool to do this high-level, high-end work.
Yeah.
When you're actually in the moment and you're dealing with all the realities of what it takes, it's an enormous responsibility, right? Because you've got clients on the one hand that are needing all of this. Hey, we're paying you. You guys had better deliver. And it better be top notch.
People get fired.
Yeah. And then you also have your team, your freelancers, your crew, and they're all saying, hey, give me what I need to do a really good job. And of course, pay me. And I'd like a raise. I want a promotion. My benefits aren't very awesome. This healthcare plan sucks. I mean, it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
So once I got to 25 people, I think there was, if I'm being really honest, there was a moment when I realized I think I was happier when we were like 15 to 20 people. And now this is different for every owner. I know some owners that are at their happiest when their team size is 3. I know some that are at 53 and they're still excited about growth. They're excited about the layers and the bureaucracy and the departments and all these kinds of things, right? And we have some people in our industry that cross over 100, and we have several companies that are in the several hundred people. Personally, I look at them and I think, that's crazy. I would never want to do that. But to the people that aspire to that and can handle those trade-offs,
they love it.
I'm like, hey, more power to you, man. How can I help you and support you? Because if you have a dream, I feel like I'm called to enable and help achieve that.
Is that your genius?
I guess so. I mean, nowadays, yeah. I mean, it's Tim, my partner, I think, often says it this way, that as Joel went along and learned everything, he remembers how he learned it. So therefore, he's able to access it and bring it back, and bring it back and share it with others. So that's his observation, but I think that's probably a good indicator of genius. It's very often the thing that you take for granted because to you it's just normal, right? This is just what Dyson does. Other people look at it and they go, no. When you do that thing, dude, you are like awesome. That's your superpower. So a lot of times that is a sign of help that helps you identify your genius.
That does have my gears spinning just a little bit, a little bit. So on FrameOne, you are the second owner that we've talked to that's exited a business and sold it, had to be acquired. Mm-hmm. I am curious, what was your reasoning for that?
Well, the inflection point was that around year 18, 19, I was pivoting yet again. And for anyone in business, you've probably experienced this where it feels like every 3 years, maybe every 4 years, you're having to, like something's changing. I'm being disrupted. I'm having to pivot and shift and whatever. And that's, in a way, it's difficult and painful, but it's also exciting. But I had done that now, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7 times or something. And I didn't find myself relishing it around year 18 or 19. And I had parted ways with my business partner. We had reduced our team size. And I was trying to figure out, well, where do I want to go next? And I had this crazy idea. I approached a good friend of mine Ryan Bramwell, who is the former owner of Spilt, which is now
Yep.
Ed's company, who's been on your podcast. And I approached Ryan at the time and said, dude, I've always been a big fan of you and your studio. We're good friends. I'm thinking like, you guys should acquire Impossible, or Impossible should acquire you, and we should join forces because we would be so awesome. And wouldn't that be exciting? And I can remember him like taking a bite of his sandwich and just kind of like shaking his head. And he wasn't excited at all about it. And I thought, I was like, dude.
We're buddies. Let's do it.
Yeah, come on. Like, get on board this train. Isn't this exciting? And he said, no, Joel, I don't get it. What I'm hearing is you have basically accomplished at Impossible Pictures everything you set out to do. You just don't know what to do next. And it was that like lightning bolt when a good friend who loves you is telling you to your face, hey dude, here's the reality. And that's when I realized, oh, right. Now what? Another good friend gave me good advice. She said, this is a season where you should just open yourself up to everything. Look, you have this amazing network, all these connections, all these people that respect you and appreciate you. Just reach out there and say, I'm opening myself up to whatever's next. Any shape, any size, any whatever. And I had a former client that when I shared that, he said, seriously? Because if I could, I would acquire Impossible Pictures because I want you to come on and be part of my C-suite, this company that I'm launching, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And by the time this transpired, it was almost the 20-year mark to the day. And I said, okay, self, this could be the good moment to close this chapter.
Yeah.
And we shook hands on that deal and closed that chapter. And I went on to work for that company for a period of time. And it's not nearly as glamorous as it sounds. I'm going to totally level with you. So when I say acquired, trust me, it's not like I'm now this giant trust funder or something. And we can unpack that if you want. But that's the essence of the story.
It sounds like at that point you had given yourself permission to think about other things.
Yes.
Which is powerful.
Yeah.
Do you want to dive into the after the acquisition type thing? How open or not do you want to get into that?
Yeah, I'm fine with sharing whatever you find most interesting within our time allotment.
So I read somewhere either in one of our conversations or through RevThink that when you close the doors for Impossible, that there was a lot of debt that came along with that as well.
Right.
Talk to me about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is one of my, as Tim and I often say, this is one of my regrets that I had to manage. Because when you're running a business, the longer you go, you will realize there's no way to live without regrets, but you can manage them. And one of the regrets I had to manage was by the time the business was getting to that point where it was going to be acquired, we had stacked. It's complicated to explain because when I say we had racked up a lot of debt, people often say, well, how is that possible? And how is this? It's way too boring and complicated to explain, but trust, it's things like cash flow and things like cash versus accrual accounting and federal versus state taxes and incentives and insurances policies that did or didn't pay, yada, yada, yada. The long and short of it was we had a line of credit that we had always used when we would do like a live action shoot. We need $200,000 to go do the shoot and then the client's going to pay us. And we used that. And over time, that line of credit didn't get zeroed out and zeroed out and zeroed out. It started to climb and climb and climb. So when the time finally came for me to shut the business, I was basically left holding the bag. There were no employees that were going to pay that. My partner and I had parted ways, so I was essentially stuck with that. I now know the lesson that I learned was one that's very simple. That is, pay yourself first, right? And this sounds so like fundamental and so elementary, you're going to laugh, but always spend less than you make. Now, here's the thing. When you're running a $5 million a year business, it's incredibly how complicated that can be.
It's really hard to track every penny, every minute.
It's let's just say it can be complicated. Now, I've since learned a very simple way to manage it because after going through that experience, I was determined as a consultant. I was like, I'll be damned if I'm going to let any of my clients or anybody in our industry go through that unnecessarily. So there's now a whole method that inside of RevThink, which Tim Thompson, to his credit, developed, a thing called the Factors Method and these other principles we call the creative firm operating system and so forth, that we don't let that happen to people. But that's the story. And yeah, what happened was several months after I shut down my business, and of course I'm acquired, but I'm given stock options, which someday in the future might be worth something. But in the short term, the government is saying we need a few $100,000 and the bank is saying we need a few $100,000 and so on and so on. Let's just say that between that and closing the business and just going through what we go through in life and personal matters, it was one of the most difficult periods in my entire life.
So when you face that kind of difficulty, how do you overcome? How do you say, okay, yes, this sucks, but pull up the bootstraps, figure things out, and move forward?
I mean, that's it. I'm going to say, you lean on friends a lot. You probably lean into family, depending on what kind of a family that you have. I had a great relationship with my dad, and he was able to help. And so there were a lot of moves, but I would say underneath it all, that it's like this idea of how the old joke, how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. And what we know is the ways that we get into debt, it's very sort of incremental, bite by bite. And then you wake up one day and you're like, oh my God, I'm super massively in debt. Yeah. Well, the way you get out is the same way. And it took a few years and a lot of, humble pie, because I spent 2 years, like being an eBay store, selling off all the assets from hard drives to video cards, right, to tape decks. That was not fun. That was not my genius. But I did what I had to do to feed my family, to keep my kid in school, all this kind of stuff. And there's an underlying optimism that says, if we do the right things will happen. And I'm just going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep figuring it out. I'm going to keep creating value for people. And maybe also you have to, like, your ego takes a bruising because you're now doing things that you just thought maybe in the past, when you had this glamorous business and all this stuff, you were like, well, I'm above that. And then when the time comes, you're like, you know what? I'm going back to these days when I was a Domino's pizza delivery driver, and I mowed lawns in the summer and whatever. And I was a dishwasher at a country club. And you realize, oh yeah, when things get tough, you dig deep and you start doing the work and you show up. And it's amazing how it's not going to change in a week or a month, but over a period of months and years, you'll get through it.
I love it. So let's dive into RevThink.
Okay.
Tell me about the origins. How did that come to be?
Well, that's a better question answered by Tim Thompson, but Tim founded RevThink. I'm not even sure of the year, to be honest, which is a bit embarrassing, but I want to say it was late 2000s. He had been at the early days of Imaginary Forces, which before that was RGA. He worked on 7 with Kyle Cooper and some of these other famous projects that IF was doing in those days. But when he parted, he founded the company basically to help his friends that were running studios and coming to him and saying, where did all my money go? Because the tax man says we made $1 million, but I
don't see it.
Yeah, I'm looking at my bank accounts and I don't see that million. In the process, he invented a method for managing production at scale and how to make sure that a company is always profitable no matter what. And that was really his bailiwick, like his invention, which fueled him working with clients one-on-one over a number of years. When he and I started working together in probably 2012, 2013, shortly before I exited, I knew, wow, Tim, if you had taught me this years ago, not only would I not be in debt, I'd probably be a little bit rich. And then when I exited and I was working for the company that had acquired Impossible, but I was very unhappy, he knew I was going to leave. And he said, you should come join me. And let's just say he won that argument because he was right. He saw something that I didn't really see myself. And that was now, that will be 10 years come this summer.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
So, what is the overall goal of RevThink?
The goal, I say this, right? Until every creative business on the planet is thriving, our work is not yet done. So our goal is to come alongside owners and creative leaders and give them the tools, the methods, the principles that creative businesses need to thrive. And by creative businesses, our sweet spot is companies that produce content. So these are motion design, animation, visual effects, production companies, sound design, experiential, immersive, gaming, right? These are all people that are creating stuff for clients on a project basis. And yeah, that's our why.
I love it. I love it. So kind of walk me through as far as the studios you're bringing on range anywhere from you make $100,000, $300,000 a year up to in the millions.
Yep.
But as far as someone that really wants to be like, okay, I need to get more out of this, where's kind of that sweet starting point for like the best fit client for you?
Well, the best fit clients for us, I would say, it was those companies that were probably $5 to $15 million a year, and that's come down a little bit over the years as we've essentially just broadened the net. And that was partly because when I joined Tim, he was this fixer that was unknown to almost everybody in the industry. And I said, hey, if I'm going to join this thing, we're going to take all this awesome knowledge that we have and we're going to start giving it away. And we're going to like open it up and invite everybody into this. And of course, I'm a big, big believer in community. So now we have this community to which you belong, and there's hundreds of other owners there. But the I'm losing my thought. The question was,
I'm losing my thought. Nick, help us out. The ideal client.
Oh, right, the ideal client. So the sweet spot for us now is probably a company that's is over $1 million, between 1 and 10 million, I'll call it. The starting point, though, is often a studio that might have 2 or 3 people. They're probably generating $300,000 or $400,000 a year. And they know, like me in my day, they know they're capable of so much more. And they're probably not paying themselves nearly enough. And they've probably been at it for several years. Like me, I was at it for 7. And they're bumping up against what I call, or have heard called, the ceiling of complexity. Like, we don't have any idea how we can take on more work, more clients, because we're already stressed out. We're wearing all these hats. And, there's just no way. They can't see it. And what I see is, we've got to unleash what you can't see, I can see. Let me help you reach this next level. And that next level is usually around $1 million. That once you get to that, things get really exciting. You start to find a lot more satisfaction. You're producing the kind of work that you want to produce. So it's that starting point is probably that doing, call it $400,000, $500,000 a year.
Sweet spot. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now I'm curious because there's a lot of ways to get to $300,000, $400,000. You can do a lot of $1,000 projects or $200,000 projects.
There you go. I like that much better.
How do you help people learn to qualify or to obtain those, the better ones?
Yeah. Well, let me go high for a second. When Tim and I first started kind of opening up RevThink to a larger audience, at that time I had noticed a pattern where a lot of smaller companies were coming to me, maybe because they knew me through Impossible and so forth, and they would ask me for my advice. Hey, can we buy you dinner while you're in LA? We want to pick your brain and all these kinds of things.
While you're at Camp MoGraph, can I sit down and talk to you?
Yeah, exactly. Which is great. I'm happy to do that as much as I can. But what I found was after, I would go back to those same guys, 6 months later and say, hey, how's it going? Meaning all those things that I shared with you and taught you, what's happening? And they would have this like, I remember you said something about, what was it again? And that's when I realized they're not able to catch these things that I'm throwing at them.
Yeah.
So the reason I'm telling you this story is at that time I realized, in order for someone to reach this next level, so let's call it for the leap from roughly $500,000 up to $1 million.
Yeah.
There are, 6 to 8 major concepts that a studio owner needs to embrace. One of them is qualifying. Okay, so back to your question. But you can't just learn to qualify and that's enough.
Yep.
Right? All these concepts kind of work in concert. It's things like pricing, it's qualifying, knowing when to say yes and when to say no. It's how to shift from being the order taker to the expert. All these things work together. That ultimately formed this thing I said called, Tim, I want to create this thing called Jumpstart, which is an accelerator. It's a class that I want to take people through. He said, Joel, that's a terrible idea because that's just going to commoditize what we do. And it's, all this. And I said, no, I think once you see it, you'll get it. And he did get it. He thought this was really tremendous. But qualifying is a piece of that. So what I was going to say is, don't think of qualifying as just one thing that you can do. It's like the analogy of the three-legged stool, right? It's just one leg.
You need your creative, you need your finances.
Yeah, it's like sales and production and creative, right?
Yep.
It's that kind of a concept. But to answer your question, when I talk about qualifying, I reference what I call the 3 R's and the 3 D's. Each one of these is like a concept that's in the program I described. The 3 R's is answering the question, why do we take on any given project?
Right.
Or any given client, any given opportunity, let's call it, just an opportunity. And the filter goes like this: the real, the relationship, and the reward. Meaning, will this opportunity be something that creates something amazing for our our portfolio? Will this be a relationship that's positive and ongoing, that refers us, that appreciates us and respects us? And then, of course, reward. Will this be financially profitable? Will they pay us on time, pay quickly, all these kinds of things? When you have those 3 things, that project is totally qualified. That opportunity, yes, go. That's one example of qualifying. And then the 3 Ds is, okay, now we ask the question, once we start talking to the actual client about actually getting started, we ask about the 3 Ds, which is the deadline, the decision maker, and the dollars, and then the thing I call the shift. But anyways, that's a whole nother concept that we can get into.
Absolutely. So one thing I've admired about you, the more I've learned about you, is you have an innate ability for positioning and making sure that people aren't just saying, we make videos.
Right.
I'm curious if there's ever a time frame where that's not appropriate. And what I mean by that is I'm gonna pick on Jay Allen a little bit. I love him very, very much.
Oh yeah, Jay at Secret Powers.
They have a motto which I believe is forged in fun, found in keyframes, revealed in keyframes.
Found in frames.
Found in frames. That's what it is. And I love it. It is fantastic.
Right.
But his studio is at a certain size where it's like they're able to when people need motion graphics for video games, they know what they're looking for. Contrast that with hyperfocus, where I'm at right now, and people don't know who we are.
Right.
So we're talking very literal. So we have to be like, we have to educate almost because we haven't proven yet.
Yep.
Is there a point where it's like you need to be literal, or does it just come out of the gate and be creative?
Super great question, and props to Jay. When he shared that positioning with me, I got really fired up, and it's been really successful for him. Like he's very proud of how that's moved his business forward. To answer your question, I would say, conceptually speaking, as a matter of principle, I find that great marketing is all about creating curiosity that leads to a conversation. But yes, at some point there is it's like a mental funnel. It's like a brain funnel where great positioning is going to make me curious. What's that? So when I see forged in fun, found in frames, or, we're kind of slightly butchering it, right?
I'm sure.
It makes me say, I'm getting a sense of something. Plus it's paired with a visual, right?
Right.
He's got these big characters like you would see in a video game or something. So if I'm that kind of person, that I love video games and the ethos that he's putting forward, and I see those things and I see forged and something about frames, and I'm like, what is that? Okay, that's a win. I mean, that is great positioning right from the start. But to your point, it's not enough because you've made me curious, but I'm pretty soon, once I start scrolling down that page or I click on the about and I go to the about, I want you to also just tell me, what the heck is it you do?
Right.
And if you don't tell me that, I'm going to be frustrated. I'm going to say,
I don't get it.
That's odd. That's confusing. So it's this idea of step one. It's usually this why. It's this mission, this purpose. It's an aspiration. It might be a rallying cry. It might be an anthem. These are all terms that I talk about when I talk about positioning. And coming up with that is so damn hard. Okay, just ask Jay. He labored over this for months and months and months, and finally got it out. I think it took him a year to get his full positioning and his new website and all this stuff done. But yes, that thing is going to make you curious, and then as you gradually are exposed to, well, who are these people, and what are they about, and what is it they actually do, and how do they do it, and those answers become increasingly literal. So that by the time you get to the bottom of this funnel, you kind of know why this company exists, but you also know what they do, how they do it, who they are. Like, oh, this is Dryson. This is, his team. These are like, okay. And so when I get to the contact page and I see executive producer, right, Susie Smith or whatever, it's like, that's a real person, and I can click on that, and it's going to send a real email to somebody on the other end named Susie, who's going to answer my question and start helping me figure out how to get my project done.
Thank you for explaining that, because it's always been I'm like, it's a motto, it's a slogan. That's not enough. Mm-hmm. And to hear it's more of a complete one package branding thing, or something designed to inspire curiosity, just kind of gets a brain.
It's an arc, It's a little bit. It's not quite a narrative arc, but it is an arc of make me curious, give me some of the details, and now give me a next step. Where do I go from here?
So RevThink has the Rev community,
yep,
which I joined last year, I believe. And I believe my personal favorite part is the fact that there are all these studio owners across the country, people that I look up to and respect and admire, that are having conversations. So Dryson, as a new studio owner who's like, I'm just trying to figure out what the F this whole studio ownership thing is, mm-hmm. can hear conversations be a fly on the wall. What additional value do people receive when they join the community?
Perspective, kindness, right? Like sounding board. I think what's cool about it is I'm going to mention my buddy Mitch again here, because long ago, gosh, dare I even say more than 20 years ago, he sort of coaxed out of me something that I hoped was true, and that was that people are basically fundamentally good. And even competitors in business, in certain limited situations, they are rivals, and they will hate each other because they won that job and we didn't, and we deserved it, and there's this crazy mentality. But if you appeal to the better angels of people's nature, as the saying goes, most people actually love to help, and they love to seek out help. And the other ironic thing is, you get a bunch of competitors like in our community, and I think it's somewhere over 500 right now. It's amazing how rarely people actually compete. It's almost like this illusion of, oh, well, if you do what I do, then I can't share with you because you're going to take what I have. That's such a myth.
It's very much so that rising tide raises all ships.
All ships. That's exactly right. And we reference that saying often. So in Rev Community, it's this idea of, hey, here's this private community where you as a business owner can join. It's currently still free, and you're going to be in a community with really serious business owners. I mean, some of the, like you mentioned, Aaron Sarofsky and people like at that level. And they're in there having conversations talking about human resources, insurance policies, and of course, things like pitching and pricing and all this other stuff. And it's incredible how everyone is fundamentally open, sharing, commenting, because they know, one, it's safe, it's private. It's also curated by myself and my team at RevThink, and Tim and I are both in there. And so we're keeping an eye on things and making sure that it's all very positive and honest, and there's integrity and so forth. But that's really the benefit is that I would say that in your career, you move along this journey, and the day that you recognize, whoa, I'm part of a community, and that community is ultimately going to be the thing that fuels my career for the long term. That's a turning point in your life, because they've always been there. Now there's this mechanism or this platform where people can tap into that. And there's all these other resources, because as a consultancy, of course, We have courses and resources and materials and other things, private spaces, very private spaces for some of our clients we work with one-on-one and so forth. But the biggest thing that you're going to benefit is, you're going to have the perspective and help and support of your peers.
I love it. Joel, I just want to say thank you very much for being on the FrameOne podcast today. And if you're watching and have not liked or subscribed, you are missing out. Please do so. And thanks for watching FrameOne.